So, in this
Uh-huh.
week's Creative Confidence Catch Up, I'm going to be talking with Clara. So, Clara, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself?
Hello, I'm Clara. I run a freelance agency called Clara Does Design. I've been posting on LinkedIn for about a year. I am a graphic design student as well. So not only do I do graphic design as a business, I also do it for studying, and I'm kind of obsessed. So I'm in my third year of uni, and I'm about to graduate. Fingers crossed.
Exciting. I'm sure you
um,
will.
Yeah, hopefully. Outside of all of that, I guess I'm a motorbike enthusiast. I love travel, and I have a new dog.
Oh,
That's all. That's sort of like summing me up about
oh,
myself,
no.
really.
That's brilliant. So, my first question to you today then is, seeing as you're into graphics and you're really enthusiastic about that, have you always had the confidence to be creative, would you say?
Ooh, not really.
Hmm.
So I have always been a creative person. So in my family, we're all very artistic in that sense. Because I come from a musical background kind of family. My parents are classically trained, and then all us kids were like into instruments and just really gravitated towards that side of like school where you could do more artsy stuff
Hmm.
rather than the structured stuff. Like, we're good at the structured, but we prefer the artsy.
Mm-hmm.
So, throughout my education, I was always like, "Oh, I'm good at this, but I don't think I can actually do this as a career, or this can't be my future," essentially. In my head, I was like, "You can't make money or you can't have a career when you're being creative." So I was like, "Okay, I'm just gonna be creative at home." So at home, I have, and still to this day, many unfinished projects which I would just be interested in doing. I taught myself how to crochet, I've taught myself how to pot. There's, like, hundreds of canvases that are half done, like painted canvases. I have no real I don't think I've got that much skill when it comes to painting, but I've got that interest to be creative and just sort of work in that sense. But when it came to being confident in showing someone that I can do something, it doesn't need to be in a sense of, like, towards work or making any sort of profit or anything. It's just purely just to be like, "Oh, yeah, I can do something." I would always be really shy and sort of like hide away and be like, "No." And the worst thing is that at that point you get this weird thing in your head of like perfectionism, and you've gotta everything must be
Yeah.
perfect before you even think about sending it out into the world, because it's like this world is all about perfection. It has to look
Mm.
Instagram worthy, it has to look right.
That's
Um
that's interesting. But can I just put in there then? So, do you think some of like obviously you're thinking yourself, oh yeah, I could be good at it, yeah. But could it be the influence of other people and what you think they like the expectation of them on you as well, maybe?
Big time, comparison is the worst
Mm.
thing.
Yeah. Oh
Literally.
yeah, that ruins all the joy in everything, doesn't it?
Like, I grew up, in the age of, like, the dawn of Instagram. So, like, when I
Right.
was
Okay.
growing up, we were all using these heavy filters on all the pictures, but they had to look the perfect way.
Mm.
Like, I remember spending quite a lot of time in coffee shops just sort of, like, trying to find the perfect angle for my coffee
Like
picture.
this, down here. It's like
My camera roll had 20 of the same picture, and I was like, "It's a cup of coffee, it does not dictate your life." Um and so, like, all these things to sort of, like, scramble on. Like, when I was younger, I really wanted to be a fashion designer, and so I
oh.
took extra classes, I learned how to sew, and at one point, I was trying to set up my own business doing so. And I remember at the time, I was just working on I think I was working on a dress for a client, and it was a lot of work, and it was a lot of thinking, and my head was, like, exploding, and I really wanted to sort of put myself out there on social media, and I wanted to post and show what I could do, but at the same time, I was like, "That hem is not perfect." Like, absolutely not perfect, or like, "Oh, that stitch is just 1 loop out," and I just remember thinking, "Oh my god, I can't put myself up against, like, people like Tiffany's, or well, terrible example, sorry, but like Louis Vuitton and
Or like
Gucci and all that stuff in
yeah.
the world," and I was like, I cannot even." So it's just all stay behind the lines, and I was like, "Oh, okay, then it's fine. It will stay with me rather than go
Mm.
out into the world," because to be creative, yeah, you have to accept an air of creative passion and madness, and just going in a way that no one else thinks. But at the same time, I think there's that weird anchor that pulls you back in to say, like, oh no, you can't just put something out that's half done or half
Mhm.
baked or half, not even like fully conceptualized. You have to have it completely conceptualized before you put it out into the world. And I think that was probably one of the drawbacks, and still is one of my many drawbacks when it comes to trying being creative. Because one of the things that I do in graphic design is I also illustrate,
Ah.
but I don't advertise my illustration that much because
Ah.
I am terrified of putting it out there and being like, "Hey, so I can actually draw." I I I have taken many classes to draw, but I don't finish things unless I feel like I want to finish them.
So it'd
I've learned.
feel pressured, wouldn't it then, really?
Yes.
Yeah, so it'd be like, "No, I can't," and then in your head, you've got that sort of in that mindset already going, "I'm not going to finish it," so it's just going to end up a
Yeah,
disaster,
it's
so you're
just like,
stuck then, aren't you?
I also feel like finishing something is the worst thing in the world, because then it's like, what if I finish it and it doesn't look the way I want it to look? And I'm like, what am I going to do with this finished product now? Like, it's just there. It just sits in the iPad or sits on my desk upstairs. Like, what do I do? But yeah, it's a weird loop that I'm currently trying to break through. I had a mate only a month or two ago who we were having this long discussion about like what I offer and things like that. And she was like, do you do any illustration?" Bearing in mind, she's my friend of 7, actually, no, God, coming up probably to 10 years now.
Wow.
And she was like, do you do any illustration?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, I do, but it's a bit personal." And she was like, "Could you send me some stuff?" Sent her a small portfolio of my stuff, and she was like, "Clara, you're really good at it."
Mm.
And I was like, "It's more terrifying to put it out there."
And that's it, like, you don't want, like, more pressure, do you, to, like, not want you to put anything out there at all,
Yeah.
but also maybe that's something that maybe you could think about in the future and testing that comfort zone. If you show somebody, you can't
Mm.
then say to them, "Well, you don't like it because it's half finished," because they aren't going to know, are they really? And they'll have ideas in their head that you want what they want you to do anyway, so
I know,
really.
I know.
Mm.
And the weird thing is that when I get a client, I do offer illustration to them, like, part of a package. But I'm not one of these people who just broadcast like, "Hey, I can be super creative in this format."
Mhm.
I'm I'm just like, "No, yep, I can do it. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I can sort of do it. It's fine."
So, in terms of, like, your, graphics then,
Mhm.
have you got a big source of support? Who do you look up to? Who are, like, your main little community? Like, yeah.
Well, okay, so, I'm gonna name drop some of the bigger leagues
Okay.
because I think it's only right to. So, Christo, like the god of graphic design and sorry, I say small businesses. He's like really super duper. But yeah, he's like the god of graphic design. He's got his business down refined down to a T. Like,
Mhm.
he's someone that I definitely admire. People like I'm going to list a bunch of graphic designers now. So Abby Cornick, I think it's Connick or Cornick. Yeah, Connick. She's great on Instagram. She's also a UK based designer. She's somewhere in the UK. I couldn't tell you where, but I
But
just love.
somewhere around.
Yeah, I just love her style of like working through a problem and just the logical steps that she takes. And then I think James Martin, he's also a really cool person to sort of be interested in. He's a great graphic designer because he's so creative and his brand is so diverse, but it all makes sense.
Yeah.
So like,
Yeah, I like that.
he has so much illustrate, like he's got a very what's the word? Recognizable color palette, but
Mhm.
no matter what he does in his design world, so like if it's an illustration, a new illustration that you wouldn't necessarily see from him, you will instantly recognize it as, that's James Martin, that's who it is. And I'm like, I love that. I
That's
absolutely adore
nice,
stuff like
yeah.
that. And then on the flip side, away from graphic designers, because I realize not many people, well, people will know them, but like people won't really be that bothered. I am a huge fan of Van Gogh. like the artist from God knows how many years ago. I love the style of work that he did when he was alive. Obviously, it was bright, bold colors, really expressionist brush strokes. It was just like a movement and feeling in all his work. And I think like those sort of people that I've listed and the artists that I sort of follow, they've always got this massive passion behind what they do, and you can always feel that in the work that they do. Like you could give them an inch and they'll take it for the full mile. You know, they'll just go absolutely ham on something because they love doing it so much. And I think that people like that are just people that I admire the most, because they don't think about like, oh well, you know, I've got this time and I've got this money and I've got this sort of like budget or whatever. They're like, oh, I really am passionate enough to go crazy on it. So that's kind of like, those are the people that sort of like get me going when it comes to design and stuff, because they're like my influences.
But that's
I would love to be in their league someday.
but I suppose with like people like that, like obviously when you're on about like obviously brushstrokes and things like that,
Mm,
it's probably because they have so much when you know when like you have so much passion, and then it gets to the
mm.
stage where I don't care what everybody else thinks. So do you
Yeah.
know, you were just it's like I'm going to do it anyway, and if just one person likes it, that's great. But if no one else does, but sometimes it's like pushing through that barrier, isn't it? And to kind of say, who cares what anybody thinks at this moment, as long as I'm doing what I want. And then hopefully there will be someone within the space that will appreciate it for what it needs to, for what it is, really.
Yeah, because you know, like, you know, using Van Gogh as an example, you know, he was someone who no one bought any of his pictures while he was
Mhm.
alive. No, like he was considered a madman. People did not care for his style. And then years later, we're like, he's revolutionary. He's the best in the world. And it's like, he just didn't care. He wasn't in it
Mm.
for anything apart from what he did. Like he woke up every morning and he just painted what he saw. And he had terrible eyesight and he painted as he saw. And I was like, that's amazing. And all the other graphic designers, they're not like, I think that's the thing. They're not trying to fit into a niche of a design or something like that. They found their way. They found what they were like skilled at and they just went with it. And they were unapologetically themselves with it
That's what you
as
want.
well. Like
Like,
that's what I want. That's who I am
mhm,
wanting
yeah,
to be.
and it's best,
I
isn't
feel
it? It really is.
Yeah, because I feel like when you're, especially in a creative industry, you're always sort of, whether consciously or unconsciously, you're always sort of molding yourself
Yeah.
to whoever you're working with or whatever sort of company or people that like you're working alongside. And that though that, you know, there is some benefit towards it because you learn a lot from their side of things. I also think that you can also lose yourself in that process, and I think it's always worth like having really strong foundation and boundaries of who you are, what you do, and where, like, what kind of style you have, so that you can bring that into working with people and bring that into the future that you have being creative, whichever way you go about it. I
Yeah.
just Yeah.
That's so true though, because I remember I did podcast with a guy called CJ, and we when we were talking, he was like, just always go back to your old work because it's usually the old work that you don't actually, as long as you're having fun, it's great. And when you go back to it, it's like I was having so much fun. Let's go back to this and then just see what happens with it. Whereas, like you said, you can kind of lose yourself when you start to gravitate towards certain people or you
Yeah.
want to be like, I suppose, like trends and stuff, isn't it? If you don't fit
Oh,
in there, it's easy to go with what's deep within, which is that initial thing that you've always done, and then kind of go with that instead.
yeah, I mean, there's something very honest and true when, like, when people say, like, when you're a kid, you have no filter. When
Yeah,
you're a little kid, you have no filter, you don't care about what anyone else is doing, you just wanna do what makes you happy.
yeah.
And there is a lot of truth in that, and going back to that state, especially when you're creative, to just be like, "You know what? I'm just gonna do finger paints and just see where it takes me." Like, it doesn't have to have a direction, but that sort of just like creative outlet could be enough to push you back into a point of joy in your work, and avoiding all the, oh, is this going to get 1,000 likes, or oh, is this going to get some interaction on this, you know, social media chain or any of that. Like, you can totally clear all of that out and you can just be present doing something that you really thoroughly enjoy. Like, I've
Mm.
had to do that a couple of times because I just sort of catch myself like, Do you actually like doing this, or are you doing this as a chore? I'm doing it as a chore. Okay, maybe we move away from
Exactly, yeah, and it's moving away from, like, what feels
mm,
like a chore into something that, like, you're actually passionate about. Yeah, that's I love
exactly.
that.
And it's so weird how so it's like such a fundamental not like thing to know about, and yet we forget it every single time. Like, okay.
So, in terms of then, like, graphics, like, we've been talking about, like, what it is that you do. So, when I think about graphics, I think
Okay.
about, like, posters and print and all that sort of stuff, so very probably stereotypical. But what does graphics mean to you in terms of, like, any projects that you're currently working on?
So for me, it's more about working more than just what the end product is. So what you've
Okay.
just said about like posters and flyers, whatever,
Mhm,
that is definitely much more end product. That's
mhm,
kind of just what we package up and we send out to the world. For me, it's more peeling it back and actually getting to the nitty gritty of how you start the project. So whenever I start a project, I start with a design brief, which basically outlines a bunch is a very long, tedious thing that you kind of have to do when you work with a designer, but it's something that's totally
yeah,
worth it because you ask questions like, where are you going in the next 10 years? What do you want this to achieve? How do you see yourself and how do you think your customer or client sees you? It's basically trying to create an entire sort of identity and profile from these questions that most business owners don't actually asks themselves. It's like being Sherlock Holmes. You're trying to figure out what's best for them and how best to proceed. Because at the end of the day, most people they just want to think, oh, I just want some nice colors, a really pretty logo, and then we'll just that's it. And I'm like, no, that's not how this
that's
works.
so
That's not
interesting you
how this
say
works.
that, because I've got a friend who, when I first started, like, the Aloo sort of branding, obviously, it was his idea for, "Aloo, it works, blah, blah, these colours, you can see," and I'm thinking, "What?" But he's like, "It's not just about the fancy logo, it's not just about the pa," and
It's
I'm like,
not.
"Ah," so, yeah, when you talk like I'm like, I see where you're getting at now."
Yeah, because everyone sums it up to just the visuals, and it's
Yeah,
like, yeah, the
yeah.
visuals are important, we get it, you wanna look good, but at the same time, like, there is so much peeled back from it. I've just, finished a brand identity project, with a client of mine, and he wanted to showcase more than just what his industry was, like. So, for the for the purpose of this, I can't explain it because he hasn't launched yet,
It's
and
all good, it's all good.
I don't feel
No,
comfortable
no,
to
that's fine. No,
like
that's
out
fine.
him just like this is it. But for example, if you were in a health and wellness sector and
Mhm.
you had a business which was to do with yoga and meditation and things like that, like you could easily go on Pinterest, type in yoga meditation. You can get like the generic color palette, generic maybe logo of like a lotus flower and stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm
I
not dissing
always
anyone
see
with
that
a
and I'm
lotus,
like, "Mm."
not dissing anyone with a lotus. I totally love the imagery, but it's been overused.
Yeah, that's
So
it, isn't it? It's very saturated out there with that particular thing.
big time, big time. And the thing is, if you want to stand out and if you want to actually showcase who you are in your business, and good business owners will be the people who actually put that time and effort into their brand identity and like the brief to properly suss out every single aspect of their business. The good ones will be like, yeah, I don't want to just be seen as a yoga person, industry person. I want to be someone who helps transformation in their lives. I want to be someone who helps people work through really tough and difficult things. I want people to walk away and feeling like £1,000 rather than, feeling like a 20 quid and then feeling a bit shiter. I'm sorry. But
It's okay.
worse afterwards.
I get you. I get you. And
Yeah,
also, there's more when, like, you delving deeper, or like business owners are kind of delving deeper. It's more about that purpose behind what it is, rather than, oh, it's a finished product and I'm just going to sling that thing out there hoping to receive money. And it doesn't always work like that, does it?
exactly. No, like people don't like people appreciate visuals, but people buy from people. We
Yeah.
want to know, like, there's a reason why companies like Apple are so incredibly popular and successful, it's because their purpose is right there, grained into the core of them, and
And
it's
they're listening to that problem, aren't they? There's a
yes,
problem there and there, and we're going to
no,
solve
no,
it.
because let's face it, we've been complaining for years about like the phone overheating or like the fact that it smashes if you hit the
Yeah.
floor. If they listen to that, then
Yeah.
maybe
Oh,
it would
yeah.
be. But the thing is that they don't care for that. They care about the software that's involved.
Mm.
They care about the ease of use for the customer. They care about all the other things, the purpose and the prestigiousness that comes with the brand. You know, there's no brand like Apple on the planet that can possibly make the same kind of product. But yeah, when it comes to working with clients, it's exactly the same. Like if a client came to me and said, "Oh, I just need a logo," I never just say, "All right, okay, I'll just make you a logo." I always look at them and I go, "You need more than a logo," and that's not me upselling. You
Yeah.
need to figure out what you need from this logo. What do you need this logo to do? Do you want it to be something that makes people go, "Oh, that company, I know exactly who that
Yeah.
is." Do you need it to be very simple? Do you need it to be sort of a little bit like quirky, fun, maybe a bit like the Pringles mascot? You know, you
Yeah.
always remember the Pringles mascot, you know, the giant mustache and everything.
Mhm.
You're like, "Oh yeah, I know who that is." What do you actually want this logo to do? Don't just be like, "Oh yeah, I kind of just want it to look pretty." Because in that case, we're in a world of lotus flower, yogis, and everyone's just got the same generic thing. And basically, my job is done in 5 minutes.
Yeah, and people and those people then are just going to get lost amongst everything if there's no
Yeah,
defined purpose as to what it's all about, and
yeah,
if there's no story behind it as to why it looks how it does, and there's just no point, is there?
exactly.
No
You want
brand.
like let's face it, the average customer is not going to stare for about 20 minutes at your logo and
No.
try and figure out every single part of it. But if you want to step off if you want to put the right foot forward when it comes to putting yourself out there into the market and actually standing out, then keep to your purpose, keep to your core values, and you will see that reflected throughout. It's like magic. It's genuinely magic because you see this little thing, this little thought process just getting bigger and bigger and bigger to the point where it's like, whoa, this makes so much sense. This is all I am. This is what I live and breathe.
Yeah, it's weird, and you'll keep going. I always find like from how my stuff is at the moment. Like
Mm.
at first, I found it all very separate, and then as
Mm.
soon as I got my mission statement in place, it was like, now this tangents off this because that tangents off there because, and it all, like you say, it starts falling into places as how it should.
Yeah. I mean, even with my branding on LinkedIn, I would argue that my branding is a little bit mad and chaotic because graphic designers are notorious for being terrible to themselves. Like when it comes to working for yourself, you're just there like, oh, but I like this, but I like that, but I like this, but I like that. And you just like crosshairs. Some people are very good at it, and kudos to them. I have not mastered this yet. But for my branding, for example, I wanted to specifically focus on a feeling. I wanted to emote
Mm.
something rather than be really sleek and cool and all this stuff and follow a trend. I wanted people to sort of feel some sort of like energy of joy, excitement, sort of as soon as you come to my page, for example, you're like, oh, this person's got some sort of like they're on some sort of like energy kick. They feel
Yeah,
good
yeah,
about
yeah. To be fair, I did actually think when obviously being passed on by other people that, and then it's just like, oh,
it.
yeah, and you could actually feel that sort of buzz sort of thing, if that
Yeah,
makes sense,
subtle
yeah?
psychology right
Yeah.
there. Subtle psychology.
No, that's cool,
But
that's
yeah,
cool.
if you can make someone feel something more than just what you want them to sort of see, that's what it matters. That's where true graphic design is actually, you know, an art form, I would say.
I love
Because
it.
like everyone can do it, but not everyone can do it good.
Mhm. That's great. Yeah, I know it's been really great speaking to you today. So thank you so much for coming on and yeah, sharing your knowledge, insights, etc. But my last question to you today is: do you have any words of encouragement or words of wisdom that you think anybody would like to hear today?
Right. So I've actually had a little think of this because I was trying to think what words of wisdom have we had? And I would just say doing is better than done. It's such a generic thing, but it's
Okay.
just going. It doesn't matter about the end product. Just move with it. Like I could also go on the cliche side of thing is perfectionism. Everything just keep doing. But,
Yeah.
but no, seriously, doing is better than done. That is the best phrase that someone has ever told me because at least then you're moving in the right direction towards what you want to do. And what's the worst that could happen? You could experiment and it could fail, or you could experiment and it could be great.
Yeah, but usually if you just try it, you'll never know, and you could have that regret if you don't try it. Then it's like, oh,
Yeah,
I never did. So it's
the
one of
what
them as well,
the
isn't
what if is actually haunting.
it? No, it's been really good though today. So thank you so much for your
Oh,
time.
thank you so much for having me on here. This has been amazing. This has been really fun.